middle of November, which also coincides with a pretty big announcement that came out of Redmond this week with .NET
Really?
5. So that's pretty relevant to us in the Microsoft world.
Yep.
But I'm not sure that always, all the time everybody's just working on .NET or whatever. Like what else has everybody been doing? Andy Schwam is here keeping the stream going tonight, and Rich Ross is joining as usual. And in case I haven't said it yet, I'm Chris Gomez, and so I think I may have actually introduced all of us at this point. Thank you for being here, whether you're joining us live on Twitch at the Dev Talk Show channel or watching us in the future on YouTube at youtube.com/the devtalkshow. So, Rich, what have you been up to?
A couple things. Been doing some work with Azure AD B2C, and I know we've talked about this on the show in the past. Doing something that's a little more off of the complicated side of things, and that not only hooking up the B2C side to authenticate people, but to bring in other Azure AD instances to it using something called custom policies. So I could, essentially, we all have Azure AD instances where our customers, where our organizations are. So I could bring one of those in, but have it all go through a B2C environment such that it's one configuration for the apps guys to put together, but we can then wire up all these other users who want to connect into it. So been kind of playing around with that. Got some good things working there. Some things I still want to take it a little bit more for some demos that we're working on, but I think it's that's been a lot of fun. So
Yeah, so Azure AD B2C, there's different use cases for Azure Active Directory. One of them is just internal, kind of taking your, and if I'm saying it wrong, please don't let me be the expert here, but taking your Active Directory to Azure and then authenticating folks internally, and it makes it pretty easy, right? But now you're adding on kind of that use case that I usually always associate with, like, say, an e-commerce site where come one, come all, and we're going to have to keep track of you no matter where you come from.
Yeah, and B2C is really that consumer play, right? It's business to consumer. So you're bringing your social accounts, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn. All of those are accounts that you can bring to authenticate into that space, and then as well as what we used to roll with a SQL membership kind of capabilities, right? So being able to have your own user store and maintain passwords that way in a secure manner, not in a database.
Yeah.
So that's really the sweet spot for B2C.
Yeah, remember when there were a lot of file new project templates with membership that went to a SQL server?
Yeah.
We talked about that on the last show, I think. Like
Couple shows. Well,
couple
I know we
shows
brought
ago,
up a few shows ago.
it came up somewhere. I mean, that stuff was brutal, honestly. I mean, it worked, but it was hard,
Yeah.
right? Oh, dude, Chris was frozen, I think. I think he's back.
Nice, good.
Yeah, he was
We're
frozen
good.
for a sec, but okay. Yeah, so that stuff was hard, I think. It was a lot of code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's gotten a little easier. You're with custom policies. You're still playing with XML, which is always fun. But yeah, it's some good things you can do to. Everybody's got scenarios that are very complex for some of these applications for bigger customers, and it's a good discussion to have.
I'm doing some stuff with authentication too, or at least thinking about some authentication stuff. Authentication, I mean, it's not the simplest part of applications, right? There's stuff like what you're talking about that really makes it easy. Makes parts of it easy. One of the idiosyncrasies I think that that I have in the situation I'm trying to work on is that it isn't open to the public, right? So we could use all those cool mechanisms to let you authenticate, like your Microsoft account or your Twitter hand. I don't know, all the different open authentication kind of things, right? But we can't just let anyone join. So we have to have some kind of way to still do like an invitation, so to speak, or even a way to whitelist people. So we have customers, and then there might be someone at that customer who's like an admin who can say, okay, the other people in my office, I'm going to enable them to come in. Like they've got the permission. Because we don't really care who the users are as long as they work at the right place, right, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's federated. Some of the stuff we do uses like a federated authentication, where I guess that's an area where I'm like kind of rough, but I guess we get like a SAML file from a customer, and then we sort of import it into our AD that way, or maybe it's ADLS or one of those AD things,
You could hook those things up either one of those patterns, depending on what it is that your partners are working with and doing. But then going back to that B2C model, you can have policies that can do SAML through that as well, in addition to the kind of the class or the standard JOT tokens for authentication. But
so maybe can I put you on a spot and ask you a question, Rich?
Sure. So happens all the time.
How does what, and again, this is a tricky subject, I think, so we want to be delicate here, I think, but how does what Microsoft offers through Azure differ from what, say, like an Auth0 or a I'm blanking out on the name of a company. It's
like Okta.
Okta, right? Thank you. That's actually the one I was thinking of. Yeah. So do you know, like, sometimes it's okay to have different brands and competition and stuff like that. We're not against that, I don't think. But is there a feature that is really different, or are there use cases that others are better? Do you know?
I'll be honest, it's not a conversation I typically have around and comparing our products to others. So yeah, I know the things that we do well when it comes to, having that one identity that goes across all of the platform or products that we're in. So you've got that one identity. It goes to the Office products. It goes to Azure. It goes to Dynamics. It goes to whatever it is you're using from our products and services. So from that perspective, that's, having that one, the identity being the security layer, basically, and having that one place that you can manage and have everything happen that way, as opposed to going to different things and having things translate from one location to another. That's typically the way that I look at when I talk about it with customers.
And do you guys do like single sign-on? Like when I say you guys, I mean, because you wrote Azure, right?
Yeah, Rich
personally, right?
Last weekend.
Yeah, this weekend on a plane. Legend has it that he wrote it on a plane ride across the country. Of course, I'm referring to the legend of Scott Guthrie writing ASP.NET MVC.
Legend. Yeah.
And I actually heard an interview. I was watching the .NET Conf, and Scott was there. By the way, I'm changing subjects a little bit, but Scott came on for a cool segment, and it was 3 Scotts. Right, you had Scott Gu, Scott Hunter, and Scott Hanselman together, and they were joking around about a bunch of stuff. And Scott Gu brought out this binder, which was the original spec for ASP.NET.
Oh, cool!
Yeah, it was really cool, and he talked about some of that kind of stuff. And then it came up that a lot of there's some confusion over the legend of the airplane legend. And it's not MVC. It's not ASP.NET that was written on a plane, but a chunk of ASP.NET MVC. He did sort of spec out and like sort of wire up I don't know if it was a prototypey version of it or something like that. Yeah, on a plane, on a cross country flight, I believe. Anyway, but going back to my question, I was going to ask about. Does the Azure, identity, or what is there? What's the name for the whole? I mean, it's Active Directory, but it's more than that, right? What do you? What's the name?
I mean, it is. It depends where your identity is and what you're trying to secure, right? So if you're thinking about your corporation, your business, you have an Azure Active Directory instance that your employees have accounts in, and that might have started as an as a Active Directory domain controller on premises, you've taken those accounts and synchronized them up to Azure AD, and then now you've got those accounts essentially living up there in a cloud format, such that you can assign licenses, assign permissions, all of those things against Azure AD, but it's all within your organization. So,
yeah, I guess I was wondering, is there like a built-in simple way to do single sign-on? I know the account goes, you can use the account on multiple apps, but that whole idea of once I'm logged into one app, I'll remain logged in on the other apps, right? Without having to do anything extra.
yeah, I mean, there are ways to do that in a couple of different manners, right? You can do that with your you can do that through the browser. So if I've already, authenticated to here, I can essentially pass on to one of the other services that are part of the services that we have in Office or what have you, and be able to just, I've already signed in, kind of exchange, my identity and my token for this other environment, or do I have to get challenged again if the URL, potentially changes, those kind of things. But there's also built-in SSO to a number of third-party partners that that you can take advantage of. So there's limits to how many you can wire up, but if you're doing things in other accounts like Workday or Twitter or things like that, you can have that SSO capability where I'm signed into my Azure AD, but I get credentials that let me now go ahead and log into those other properties, and they've already been wired up for me. Yeah. So yeah, and that's just one thing, right? And we talked about the identity thing before, and that if every organization has an identity, then I can allow people from other Azure Active Directories into my environment as guests and let them access some of the content that I have that we might be working on. So maybe we're collaborating in Teams, maybe we're working on a document together through SharePoint. I can let people come in as guests, and then what happens then is, if for whatever reason they leave their organization shuts off their account, and I don't have to worry about that account coming back to somebody gain access into my environment, like we did when in the past you would create an account in your domain controller for those guests. Maybe it's a separate side domain controller, but
then you forget all about them.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so that kind of closes that security hole around that.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's taking it. Is it taking like Federated Auth to like its conclusion, where yes, with this particular customer or it doesn't even have to be a customer, just someone we're working with, say, hey, we can. It sounds like you have the ability to let them make the decision who has access, or maybe even you have some control. Is this what's called? Is this all part of Azure AD Connect, or am I thinking about something else?
Yeah, so Azure AD Connect is something else.
Okay.
I'll table that there for a second, but it is all part of the capabilities of Azure. When we think about different Azure AD tenants, we call that B2B, so business to business, being able to bring your business customers as guests into my Azure AD tenant. That AD Connect is essentially the software that does that synchronization of your domain controller accounts to the Azure Active Directory environment.
There's so many scenarios that I think must come up between, allowing, like you said, that customer use case of people that we haven't even met yet, but we want them to sign up, or maybe it's people that are, you've signed up with B2C, but we also want to use them to this hybrid business work. And, just looking at the Azure Active Directory docs and like all the different product terms, there's a lot of them because of all these different scenarios. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's, when you talk to a customer who maybe has that kind of, I've got this storefront or this, public facing environment, and I need to have not only people sign up, as you mentioned, and that's the consumer side, but I also have partners that I want to be able to slide into there and let them have access to certain capabilities that maybe the end users don't have. So I've got different ways of seeing who those partner users are and giving them their own view and their own levels of access. And then same thing for my employees, right? I want them to be able to go out there and access and interact with that site and have the right level of permissions that gives that they would need to as employees. So all of that you can essentially manage through that B2C landing place, right? So my application is an app developer, which is kind of, when we think about our focus here, how do we make the things a little bit simple for the app developer. I've just got to write my application and do, the typical app registration against the Azure AD environment. But in this case, it's an Azure AD B2C world. And then I just say, well, anybody who needs to authenticate goes over there. And there are flows that take place to understand, well, are they part of the B2C environment because they're coming through as social accounts, or are they part of some kind of a corporate Azure AD because we've wired that all up to be able to look at those and use those as a place where they can come through and register through here. So it makes it easier on the developer in that I can, essentially have a little, code that does authentication, but it's a little more lightweight, and let the back end processes happen, and have someone who's really an identity specialist be able to craft the right level of policies, craft the right level of security around that, and make sure that all of the connections take place and route traffic where it needs to.
A lot going on.
Yeah, there's so much to learn with this.
I'm still learning. So
I was just looking here at what you were, as you were talking about that, looking at the product docs and the getting started, and thinking, wow, there's a lot to look at there.
Are you showing that up on the screen?
No, I mean, I have it, but I'm not looking at anything specific anymore. I was looking a little while ago.
Yeah, there is. There's a, pretty much any scenario you can think of, there's a way to handle it across that kind of a landscape, just because it's meant to be externally facing through consumers and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, I just noticed there's like a whole identity center in the documentation with Azure AD and these other services here that I actually don't know that much about. So, man, there's just so much.
There's a lot.
There's
a lot.
And then
to
the
all
other
these things, it's like a lot to know. Like, I wonder if, I don't know. So, Chris, you, and I'm not to put you on a spot. You don't sound like you're saying you're not that familiar with it, right? Maybe this isn't a situation that comes up for you guys at work, right? Or is there someone in your organization, or your previous organizations, where you had that one, like the identity woman or man who sort of handles, they're the expert. Like you want to wire up your app, they're going to take care of it for you. Do you find it? Do you notice if there's a trend where there's one person in a shop that knows that stuff? Have you seen that?
Yeah, so when I think back over some previous orgs, and some of them go back quite a ways, maybe 15 years. Sure. And so Active Directory ruled in that scenario, where it was just like, hey, and Rich was mentioning it earlier. I have worked, and I'm not trying to call anyone out. I think we all understand that the solutions of today weren't around in 2000 or 95 or 2005 and so on. But yeah, I certainly know of some scenarios where Active Directory ruled the day, and customers got logins, accounts in the production Active Directory, which isn't the same thing as the corporate Active Directory. But then that also meant that here's what happens, right? It's getting difficult for developers to figure out what's going on. So now developers have logins in that production Active Directory. And I think we do need a way out of that, and that's just using Active Directory. Now, I worked for a while. I worked for a very large healthcare-based company, exactly what you think of when you think of enterprise. And we're not talking about, when you said, was there a person in charge? There were teams of people trying to figure out how should everyone determine who's logged in, whether it's an app that's a quote internal app, does it take customers, can customers access this? And then furthermore, they had to figure out solutions, or at least try to figure out solutions that worked across platforms, because within the same enterprise, a massive international enterprise, you've got teams that are doing .NET, teams doing Java, teams doing Python, teams doing Node, and they all have different heritages. Some of these teams might have been doing some stuff back in VB6 days, and you're just trying to get them all closer and closer to the same page. But it felt like a race that never ended. You certainly had a goal. This is where we want everyone to be, but you recognized that there were legacy apps that were super business critical, that they weren't ever going to meet that standard.
Mm-hmm.
And then you spend a lot of time talking about like, well, can we figure out how to get them on this standard anyway? Is there something we can do to thread that needle? And sometimes the answer was, I don't know. So, yeah, it's, it's so easy to start a new project, whether it's a web project or even a cloud native project, and leave identity and auth for later. And that seems like something you should really get right as early as possible. Bolting it on seems hard.
Yeah, that's like with any security thing, right? Everybody says, "Well, we'll handle security later," and that's just like that's like sweeping something under the rug and then realizing that it kind of grew into something ugly under there in the meantime. Go ahead, Sandy. So, Andy.
What? Yeah, I know. I agree. I think that there's certain things that we want to leave for later, but we get it wrong when we do. It just makes it worse to kick the can down the road, right? You don't want security to be your technical debt.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And that technical debt, maybe that implies you're leaving it for way longer. But I'm saying that even, it's like here's the way you should start up a new application, right? You create the application and then you check it into source control, right? Like as soon as you get something, check it into source control. And then you should create your DevOps process around it, right? Before you add any features to it, right? And then, again, this is just me thinking off the top of my head. And then the next thing you do should probably be security, right? So the application is secure. And then everything else you do after that will work with the security. It's going to work because you're building it incrementally, right? The DevOps is there. The check-in is there, because you've got your source control provider and things like that. So to me, do I always do that?
It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Because I would add to that list. Like we can keep adding to that list.
Yeah, what would you add to that list?
Well, I think now what's becoming clear to me is monitoring needs to be added to that list early. That's everything from logging, catching errors. And it's not to say that we don't log. I'm sure I've written many an application where sure, we spammed a bunch of stuff out to the log, but we didn't make it useful.
Right.
And so I can go back over a long history and think about how you even rely on that poor central log, the one that gets huge, where what's the first thing you ask? In every project, there's a log like this. You start asking the folks who are coming to you saying, hey, we don't know what's wrong with this. You say, hey, did you look in the blah, blah, blah ops log? It's in C Windows System 32, something or other. At some point, they begin to know that log better than you, and you wrote the code. And that's really scary when you get to that point. And they start diagnosing things in ways where you go, really? Are you sure that that's what that means? And they're like, oh, every time. That's totally what it is. And you have that uneasy feeling that you're like, gosh, is that really right? Is that like a total hack? But it's because I don't know that we, and this stuff is hard. I'm not trying to say we're all getting the investment in monitoring and metrics right away, so that you've got a piece of software that on source control, it gets built, it gets deployed to testing labs of some kind. Maybe some tests are run on it, but more importantly, when things go wrong or even right, are you getting those performance metrics and also error metrics back? And that gets left. Sometimes that gets left for years.
Yeah, because it's not a feature, right? Nobody sees it. Nobody thinks about it.
Yeah. Well, how many of these things have we seen? I've seen the DevOps get pushed off for years as well, right? Not so much these days. I think we've become very DevOps focused. And I don't mean we, like my organization. I think that's spreading. But I think
it's spreading, but there's still...
And on the diagnostics place, I don't think that's caught on as much. And so I think you have... And what's amazing is how many times have you heard this story, whether it's about DevOps or logging or whatever you want to call it, but let's use logging and better analytics like that, diagnostics, I should say, is that, 3 years, into some app, they're having trouble and you say, well, let's add some diagnostics to it, right? And all of a sudden they're able to debug quicker or whatever quicker. And they go, I wish I had this 3 years ago. It's like, yeah, that's right. You're going to, you need it on day one, right? Because how many times
definitely.
do you repeat, without good diagnostics? You run the app, you try this scenario, you try another scenario, you wait for it to break. Because those diagnostics aren't in there, you waste so much time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why when you think about at least we've been talking about DevOps, it's part of that DevOps lifecycle of having the monitoring and having the telemetry coming in almost from day one. You mentioned, build the project, immediately throw into DevOps and start building your processes around it. Part of that process should be, how are we going to measure this?
Definitely. And
I
those are
think
hard
as we
things
move to
because
being, yeah.
no, I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
we all know what happens, and I've made this pitch to people so many times, and I know you guys have heard this before, and you've made the same pitch to people, but it's like, what happens is I used to, we got some design your logs to write your, this is a good one, design your logs to write your tests, says Skyhoshi in the chat. I see that. That's an interesting, design your logs to write your tests. So... Sorry, that just popped up and caught my eye as I happened to be looking at that screen, and it caught my attention. What I was going to say, we can come back to this in a minute, is the business is always asking for a business feature. Can't you just get this done real quick so we can show it, get the team excited? And no one's excited by your diagnostics or your DevOps, right? So we have this pressure to get business features done, right? And I always say resist that pressure. This is just part of starting an application, right? You just have to do these things on day one and all.
So do you think it would help if the teams that were responsible for this support, operations and so on, if they had good ways to log just how much they were working on these issues and then show that going down because of your metrics and because of your ability to basically look at a log and know exactly what's going on? Does that help with the business? Does that start to translate into dollars and time?
These support people?
Well, there's a lot of organizations where some people are responsible for taking a call or reading an email, and sometimes it's the developers. Yeah. It is. Sometimes it's not, though.
Yeah. Where I work and where I've typically worked, I'm trying to recall, has there been a situation? There might be a support line. But once it's something technical, it's coming right to us. They're not looking in logs. But I guess you're right. There are places that do that. That's not my case. But boy, those people would be thrilled if you had diagnostics and things like that.
Yeah, I feel like if we could show the time you were saving, because it is, if you do a great job, then you don't miss the time and effort that's being saved. But you don't want to do a bad job either.
No, but you know what? It's one of those skills that once you learn how to set up the authentication, right? The problem I have with some of these things, I guess I'm going to contradict myself. I was going to say, so let me make two statements here and see if this makes sense. I was going to say, once you learn how to do that stuff, that it's pretty quick and it's pretty repeatable. Adding diagnostics, trace logging, whatever you want to call it. It's really not that hard to add to your application. I didn't say it's easy, because I know that's a bad word, right? But I kind of said it and said it's not that hard. Once you add authentication to the application, it should be repeatable process for other applications. But then I'm contradicting myself, because as I was saying that, I was thinking, the problem is most of us don't do file new project that often. So you get really good at setting up let's go back to authentication. You go really good at setting up that authentication, whatever it is, whatever time it takes. And then you go to work on your application. 2 years later, you're starting some new project and you're like, how did we do that again? Right. And so,
or the world's changed.
And
right.
Yeah. So it's not, you can't even do what you did before, and there's new stuff to do.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
It's just not the same. So this stuff gets, I guess that's one of the reasons why it's hard, because the stuff does change all the time. So I think that's indicative of our job in general. Yeah, go ahead.
I worked years ago. I mean, I was pretty junior at the time, and this kind of goes back sort of to a little bit of what Skyhoshi was saying. I think he said it in a much better way. He
or she, I think, right?
Well, so you're right, except that I actually know who that is. So, okay. So that's why I said he. Other than that. So, but you're right.
We try to
don't
be,
assume on the show. We try.
politically correct it.
Well, we don't assume. Yeah, we don't assume. But in this case, so in any case,
that's Chris knows me.
yeah. So I worked with somebody who, let's just take a generic problem happened, and what was happening over and over. Has this ever happened to you folks? Is that everyone's gotten so good at looking for that log and finding that message to fix that problem, but the message doesn't even, it's not related, or worse, it doesn't really tell you what to do. So his mantra was this. His mantra was, first you fix the error message, then you fix the error. And what he meant by that, he had several little corollaries to that. One of them would be that if the message says something like access to path not found, and everybody's become used to that meaning that the blue cable wasn't plugged into the wall, that you should actually go change the message to be, hey, go check that the blue cable is plugged into the wall. Now, I've made up kind of a fantastic scenario, but we've all run into things like that. Like, the message should tell you the disks might be full. The disks should, because these are the things that have solved the problem before. That was one corollary to that. The other corollary was just more simply that if you've run into that, all our code often has those scenario where, it's running through all these different paths, and that bad things can happen. So you've got that kind of generic error message. It might even be a catch exception EX that just catches them all. That as those are coming in, that you should be fixing your code for the specific cases. So he had always said, like, the first thing I do if there's a bug and I'm going to write some code to fix it is fix the error message, then fix the error. And he's like, so many times developers, you just go in and you change the code, and then you just hope that the error doesn't happen again. And it's like, no, the next time it happens, I want everybody to know exactly what it was and exactly how to fix it based on that scenario.
Yeah, yep. Make our jobs. We got to make our own jobs easier. Now, I really love that. I don't think I've put that into words, quite that clearly before. I think I've thought about it. I've probably done it a few times, but probably not really consistently. I think the modern version of that also that goes along with that, the phrase you hear a lot, and maybe we can combine these things, is fix the error message, write the test.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sure. Right? Because that's like sort of the modern version. People say is when you find the problem, fix the test, then fix the problem. You're saying also fix the messaging, right? Fix the logging. Like, give yourself some help for the next time. I think it's really good advice. I like it a lot.
The next person stuff. And I'm seeing that now. I see it in places that traditionally you wouldn't have seen it, like the Visual Studio compiler. I'm talking about C++ days when I talk about this specific mentor. And boy, if there's a language where a missed semicolon would lead to an error message that said, linker exe could not path to something or other in the disk sector 3, and you're like, what? Oh, I missed a semicolon. And today, as we saw just a couple weeks ago with the pattern matching episode, when I tried to use a feature that was in C# 8 or 9 or something like that, but I was specifically back, forcing the language back to 6, the compiler message, in fact, it wasn't even the compiler. The Intellisense squiggly said, hey, this isn't available till 7. And I was like, wow. We've come a long way from getting a pointer dereference wrong, and what do you get? 107 compiler errors and 34 linker errors. Like, we've come a long way to Intellisense saying, Intellisense telling you, oh, by the way, that's a cool language feature, but you can't use it yet. So
I just had to throw in a sound effect and try that out. And I saw you laughing, so I assume you heard it. I think you're right. And when you showed that last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, I was kind of floored. Like,
that was cool.
The help we get now is unbelievable. And yet, and it's hard to think about how we lived before that. But we did. But these things are all made to make us, more, faster at getting these things done and stuff like that.
Yep. Yep. No, it was real. It was interesting too. Something that we didn't talk about 2 weeks ago is I'm not sure I'm going to get this feature exactly right, but we all know about Intellisense, whereas you start to type after the dot typically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Intellisense is coming along and saying, well, maybe these methods, but I don't know if this is called IntelliCode. Sometimes I don't get the feature names all exactly right. But now we're getting where after you hit the dot, we're sure it's showing you things that at least alphabetically match what you're typing. But then there's those with the stars that are like, we're looking at the context of your code, and I'm pretty sure you're going to want to do this. And it's like, one time before I even did anything after the dot, it suggested to me is null or empty, and I'm like, well, how did you know? How'd you know that's the one I was reaching for?
Yeah, and they put in my understanding on a lot of that stuff. I remember when we saw that, and I think it's been in Visual Studio for maybe 2 years or something. It's hard to remember when these things came in. I think I remember seeing this, and they analyzed, and I guess still probably analyze code bases, right? It's like a machine learning algorithm that say, 80% of the time or 90% of the time when someone has code that looks like this and they hit the dot, they're going to the is null or empty, right? And it's like,
right.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can run your code base through it too.
Yeah, you can, right.
And it's location based, right? Or it's contextually based, right? If I'm in this block of code and I'm iterating through, a collection of objects, I'm probably going to want to do this as opposed to if it's in some other block of code. So it even has, a bit of that kind of context around it too.
It's awesome. Like, just to think, we think we're so special. We're so gifted as developers. We're writing these lines of code. And then we realize that the machine could kind of write it for us because we're just doing the same thing everybody else does, and then we, but again, we want those things to be fast, right? I mean, I'm kind of making a joke of it, but I don't know if we would call that boilerplate code, but this is the day in and day out kind of stuff where the machine can figure us out. What we get the big bucks for is solving the harder problems, right? And we want to make these everyday things. We want to make that stuff as easy as we can for people, right? And for us, I think it's cool.
Right.
So earlier we talked a little bit about. You started off the conversation when you start an application, first things you'd better do.
Yeah.
And that list is growing on us. But what I find interesting is to start thinking about the things that we actually should intentionally delay. And this goes back to the idea of, good architecture is what is deferring as many decisions as possible. So in the modern sense, what I'm going to throw out there, and this is probably a whole show, frankly, is if you are too quickly trying to figure out how to send some kind of communication or call a method on some specific process in today's world, maybe we shouldn't be coupling so tightly. Maybe we should be saying like, hey, we're going to write to a queue, and then what happens after that? I don't know. We're going to publish an event, and then what happens after that? I don't know.
Well, and part of it is you don't know who might want that event in the future, right? Who's going to want to consume that? And that's part of the, you've got certain things that your application is going to potentially need that message downstream, but what about the things that come later? And that makes if you build it that way or architect it that way, that makes your application that much more updatable and able to easily include features without having to rework everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could play devil's advocate there, and I'm calling it that because I agree with what you said, generally speaking, right? And I think that's a good use case, like sending a message off to a queue because you don't know what's going to need it or something like that. On the other hand, there's been times where I've seen developers start to work on an application, and we're talking about some basic stuff, and they're like, "Well, I want to build a queue. I want to do all this." And what are you building a queue for? Well, we don't know what we might need. Well, what do you need today? And they're like, "Well, we only need one message to go over here. Do we want to build the queue?" So I guess it's a tricky thing knowing when, and I think this is one of the things that makes someone a quote senior developer or whatever you want to call it, an architect, whatever the term is. But how do you know when is that the right answer? When do you want to delay it, and or when do you want to complicate it, and when do you not want to complicate it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're always making that judgment call between you ain't going to need it and we don't know what we're going to be asked to do next.
Yeah, you don't know what you
Because
don't know, and you ain't gonna need it.
Yagni is the easy one. We love throwing that around. Yagni, Yagni, Yagni. You ain't gonna need it. But then, you know, after you've painted yourself in the corner and the business says, "Oh my gosh, we've got to make this move," and you can't do it, that's
Right.
pain.
Right.
So
I think that by working with good patterns, right, clean architecture and single responsibility, all other things we've talked about, I think it does make it easier where your code is sort of isolated, and you can say, you know what, changing this thing from a call to a foo service into a queue won't be that hard because I know right where to go, and it's sort of modular, and you got to make some changes, right? But that's another thing I think you got to get right in the beginning is don't start just hacking and throwing code in there. I think things get messy pretty fast. Think about organization of your. This is an interesting topic. We're diving down this topic further, but like organizing your files and thinking about where you're going to put stuff and making good decisions. At like not having chaos, right off the bat on day one. I don't know. We should keep a list of these. Are you writing these down? Should we write these down? Replay
yeah,
the
Somebody
show.
should put a whiteboard up.
You know what I've been thinking, and I don't think I have it. For folks who maybe want to peek behind the curtain a little bit, there is a OneNote where we or just throw down topic ideas, and sometimes they're as little as like a sentence. That doesn't mean it's fleshed out and ready to discuss. But one that I keep thinking about throwing in there is a lot of Fred Brooks' work, like the Mythical Man Month, and there's another thing that I believe he wrote about where he talked about, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to apologize right up front, and that's why it needs to be fleshed out. Is that I think he talked a lot about how the first system you write to throw away, because. Here it is. The concept of throwaway prototypes was applied to computing by Brooks in his famous search for a magical silver bullet in Mythical Man Month. I think he has an article called "No Silver Bullet," and I'm pretty sure the quote is "Plan to throw one away because you will anyhow." And the reasoning is to get away from what you were saying, Andy, of like overcomplicating the system because of trying to anticipate everything you need. Or I think what he was searching for, and this was 1975, by the way, is he was searching for a middle ground of, well, you plan to throw the system away so that you get a little bit of practical experience on what you probably should be building. And it would be interesting to go back and read that, and then maybe it's something that would be worth discussing. A lot of Brooks' writing is so fascinating to me, and it's amazing to me how much of this stuff was discussed, and we're still like trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, because the problems haven't the essence of the problems hasn't changed, right? The technology's changed, the tools have changed, but I think a lot of the problems are the same.
Yeah.
You also got me thinking when you said that about one of the advice I used to give a lot is throw away the prototype, which maybe relates to what he was saying, which is that you're going to get the first one wrong. But I'm also saying sometimes you're building a prototype, and then how often do people say, "Well, it's pretty close. Let's just use it." And
Let's
it's
just
like,
use it. Oh gosh, I know.
No, throw away the prototype, right? Because it's got all those shortcuts.
I remember having
Rich?
I remember having that discussion with the business folks. Like, okay, we're building this. This is going to go away. We'll never see production, because they see it and like, you're that close.
But Rich,
like, no, we're not.
But Rich, it's pretty good, right? It works. Yeah. You
So
don't know that I coded
tell.
that button. It's all hard coded under the cover. It doesn't
exactly.
really work.
So a story that I can actually tell is about a project I worked on when I still lived in Southern California called Disneyland Forever. And I'm going to try to see if I can find a picture of the kiosks. Have I told you guys about Disneyland Forever before? I mean, because everybody hears it at some point. You know me long enough, and you are going to hear about Disneyland Forever.
That's going to be the other side of the shirt.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've got some pictures of the old CDs up. This is just from a Google search or Bing search, actually, it turns out to be. And not to be confused with a fireworks spectacular at Disneyland called Disneyland Forever. It was a product where you could listen to sounds and music throughout the park and then make your own custom CD. In fact, if you're old enough, you'll recognize that gold color CD. I don't know if you have it up on the screen there, Andy.
Oh, you're not sharing.
I'm not sharing.
No, you're not sharing.
Sorry, I forgot that I turned off my share.
Yeah. Why don't you
That's
share,
my fault.
and I'll go ahead and bring it up. We're putting us through the paces here, so we should have it up. The stream's actually pretty close today, by the way, guys. You notice that we're like on a 3 second delay.
Good. That's good. So yeah, if you're old enough, you recognize those gold CDs you burned yourself.
What's a CD?
And yeah, exactly, right? What's a CD? And we had a printer that would print those jewel cases in the store, and it would print on its screen right onto the CDs. And I worked on it. And let me tell you, it was a labor of love, but I didn't come on the project at the very beginning. And so one day the people who did and kind of got the ball rolling and even got a whole company started out of it, the subject came to why in the code base, this was a VB6 and C++ code base, why was so much named Genghis? All the design documents, Project Genghis. Okay? So, we've had a little bit of this. We might look at this a little bit in the future. This was a waterfall designed project. There was a requirements document, a design document. The point is everything said Genghis, like Genghis Khan. Yeah. And so one day the CTO of the company, who I'm telling you was in the trenches, about four people who made this thing, maybe 5, maybe 6, who made this thing in 10 weeks just to get Disney to say, yes, start a company and do it. Right. So why did you call it Genghis? And he said, I'll tell you why. He said, and this was an older gentleman, right? I think this was the last company he did before he retired, maybe the second to last. And he said, I'll tell you why. Because if we would have given it a code name that was even reasonably close to something that might sound like the product name, Disney would have just used it. And I didn't want to be responsible for naming it. So if I named it Project Genghis Khan, I knew Disney was going to not use that name.
That's cool. That is a cool sort of like protection built in.
Yeah. And I can relate that to some other stories about times where developers who were mentors of mine specifically told me, this is a prototype. I'm actually don't want to fix this code because then I'm afraid we might use it. The main story was the Disneyland Forever one, where that came from, where I was like, really? What an interesting reason to give it a terrible name, right? And then I didn't mean to take it down, but yeah, I couldn't find the kiosks. There were these kiosks in the parks, and it was cool stuff. I didn't actually close that, did I? That would be terrible.
You're still sharing. You're still sharing.
Oh, okay.
But you went to your desktop, so I took it off the stream. I could put it back if you want. Yeah.
I think what I did is I accidentally closed all of the tabs that I had open. So go ahead. Let's keep.
That hurts. That hurts. Yeah. So you know what? You know what I want to show you guys? Can I share my screen for a second? This is just me being geeking out here a little bit. But let's see if I have this right here. That is not. There it is. This, my friends, is what my desk looks like right now. Okay. This is what it takes to run the show for me. I thought this was kind of funny. Rich, is this what it looks like when you run the show?
I think I have maybe one less monitor, but other than that, it is pretty similar.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? This machine over here, my Surface, is just, I came up with this idea. This is how I can test the audio on the stream. It's just easier to listen to another machine that I can't bleed the audio through. And then I have, basically 4. This is 3 screens on one device. This is the other machine. This is the streaming box. But I just wanted to share with you guys. This is what it sort of looks like right now over here. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, mine is a total mess.
Well, I cleaned it. I moved some papers off to take this picture. I do want to, to be fair. I did I did do that, but I'm taking it off. Oh, I didn't share. You know what? I forgot to Skype share, so I shared it on the stream. I guess you guys saw it. I took it off now. We're done. Didn't want to take up too much time on that. I just thought it was kind of funny, and I'm. You know what? This is my chance to brag a little bit, I think. And if you guys don't like it, I'm going to do it anyway. But Rich, I'm complimenting you. I'm always really impressed with the way the show runs, and you have everything going, and you do a really good job at it. I was really nervous that this was going to crash and burn pretty badly today with me running the stream. Just so you guys know, we're on 0 frames dropped and things like that, according to the tooling and stuff like that. And I think we had a little audio problem in the beginning, but like it's working, and I'm psyched. And so maybe we're on our way towards our goal of like each of us being able to do different jobs on the show and support each other when they're not around and stuff. So that's a little bit of the stream stuff. We should also say, speaking of the stream and what we're doing here, we'll get back to the fun conversation soon, right? But while Chris is busy reclaiming all his tabs that he's trying to recreate, I'll say, hey, thank you if you're here with us live. And tonight is an unusual show. We're just kind of like chatting. We're just kind of talking about stuff. Some nights, I'd say most nights, we have an official topic. Sometimes we have a guest. And we hope you guys will come back and see us again and be a part of the show. If you are hanging out and you're quiet, that's cool. Hang out and be quiet and don't say a thing. That's great. If you want to throw a comment at us or a question or something, do that too. We love to get everybody involved and joining the show. We're here Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/TheDevTalkShow. And the archives are on YouTube. 2 ways to get to that: video.thedevtalkshow.com or youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow, right? Either one of those ways will get you to our archives where you can check out all of our old shows. And do us a favor and, throw us a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe, a follow, any of whatever those things are on the different platforms. We like them all. We might even have a little animation going across the screen if that works. I don't even know if that works, but maybe it does. And we hope you'll come back and hang out. And if you have any suggestions for other topics, we're always interested in that too, right? Guys, this is a different kind of show for us. I think it's kind of neat. It's different. I guess we'll find out what people think about that, but it's different. We're just kind of hanging out, talking about different stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of goes back to, the roots of where this idea for the show started, right? We didn't really have an agenda. We didn't say, hey, we want to show this, or let me show you this bit of code, which is awesome when those things happen. But it's just, hey, let's just talk. What are you working on? What are you doing? It is the Dev Talk Show.
The Dev
Billy
Talk Show.
Night. No, just kidding.
Yeah, the Dev Talk Show, right? Right? It was one of the ideas. Like maybe some nights we'll just talk.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So I do think we would be remiss if we did not spend some time discussing the news of the week.
Did you guys attend the week? The 2 days?
I have not gotten to see a whole lot of it, but I have gathered some links that we'll make available as a one tab. And we try to, I am trying to do is when we've discussed things in the show, I am trying to gather them together. I wasn't sure what to put for the Azure AD. If there was one thing to sum that up, but .NET 5 is here as of yesterday. And there's a lot going on with it besides being, in my interpretation, it's the next version of .NET Core, but it is the reason why you were calling it .NET 5 is because this is what's going forward. We're not going to see a .NET framework next, the Windows framework. This is the cross-platform, high-performance framework with some mature other pieces now, like ASP.NET Core, EF Core. Those aren't new anymore. ASP.NET Core and EF Core are well worn. There's an announcement for that. So I don't know if we want to take a look at my screen real quick. We can run through some of the announcements real quick.
Yeah, you know what? You just said something that I thought was interesting during the conference, the .NET Conf, which I watched. I'm bringing up your share now too while we're talking. Is that I like what they did with the name .NET 5. I think that it made sense. Unfortunately, what I hadn't thought about all along is that Entity Framework missed that because they already had like EF6, like they were past it already. So
Yeah.
EF is still called EF Core
Yeah.
5 or something, I think, or maybe it's called, I forget, but it's unfortunate that they had to, they had already blown past the number 5, and so they couldn't do that.
Yep. And then, so yes, there's there's a .NET 5, there's the EF Core 5, ASP.NET Core, which that's what it's called. In fact, you can see that the parsing of the header, ASP.NET Core and .NET 5. So it's not, I don't think it's fair to call it ASP.NET Core 5. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Maybe
there must
it does.
be a version number in it somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I imagine when we go look at the packages, they might say 5, but I don't know. In fact, here we go, right? Update packages 5. So anyways, ASP.NET Core for .NET 5. I find it interesting that it doesn't say ASP.NET Core 5. See that? There could be, maybe they just don't want to be tied to it, because who knows? C# 9, and interesting to me that Mads leads off talking about records.
Yeah.
And then F# 5.
Can I say?
Yeah.
I watched one of the demos. I assume all this content's going to be recorded. I guess I can bring up the. On my screen, I'm going to bring up
that's coming up here is .NET Conf, and the day one you can watch on YouTube. Day 2 is going on right now.
Yeah. What I was going to say though is I'm going to look at the agenda real quick and tell you the name of the session, because I sat in on. Oh, I guess it was what's new in C#, right, with Mads and Dustin. This was a really good talk, and what you were just showing, records, of course, being the top thing, and a bunch of other stuff. It was such a great demo. Of course, who's going to demo it better than Mads and Dustin from the team that are writing this stuff? And it was a really good demo. And so if you haven't seen it on our show or somewhere else, I recommend that that session in particular. I think it was only a half hour. They did not go into every single thing on C# 9. That's for sure. But it was a really good intro to some of those features.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I mean, there's a lot here just looking at the blog post. There's a lot in the documentation, which we talked about in the pattern matching show and so on. But yeah, .NET Conf is going on right now as we speak. Like here's day 2 live on YouTube right now.
Yeah. What are they talking about?
Let's
see.
I don't know what the specific session is, but I think we've gotten to the community portion. I could be. There is a portion where it begins being lined up. I think even this is maybe 36 hours straight or so of community talks, which is really cool. If I
understand correctly, they're talking about maybe it's migrating a Windows Forms app to Blazor, could be. That says 2130. Is that 9:30 now, right? Am I doing that right? With Georgia Nelson.
2. Yeah, no, you're right about Georgia.
Okay,
migrating a Windows Forms app to Blazor.
She's talking
That's
about
cool.
And they showed off some stuff like that in the keynote too. I think they showed off like some of those things. I saw some good talks, and I thought it's a good conference. You're getting the content right from the source.
Yeah, this is it. And then like you were talking earlier about finding our channel and where to download .NET 5. So what I usually do is I try to keep. We talked a little bit about the throwaway prototypes, and this was the best I could do for Azure Active Directory. But at the end of this, we'll have a link to all these tabs so that you didn't have to jot those down.
I pasted one in the Discord.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's good. Cool.
Yeah, I'll add that. The Azure AD documentation. So yeah, if I could have found a better Disneyland Forever link, I'd have put that up there, but oh well. It turns out that it was a popular project, and there were many a lot of people started websites around it, and after the attraction kind of went away, there were some fan efforts to locate the music and see if they could archive it, or the sounds and the music, and archive it for historical purposes. I thought that was interesting, thinking how, like, yeah, I was the one in the lab burning CD after CD after CD and testing scenario after scenario after scenario. It was fun stuff. I mean, that was a labor of love for me because I grew up in Anaheim, and so Disneyland is a cool place for me. But
it's right in your backyard.
Yep, it sure was. I grew up a block from Harbor Boulevard and go 8 miles down the road to 1313 Ball Road. So the other thing is Visual Studio will get updated if you have Visual Studio installed. I haven't updated it yet, but you update to 16.8, and you will be ready for .NET 5.
Yeah,
So,
I got the new Visual Studio. I went and got that.
Yeah, I'll hit update. There it goes.
Yeah, there's some.
How long's this show?
Yeah. This doesn't usually
It won't
take
take that long. Although I did my update and I needed, because of things I had running, I needed to do a reboot. So it is waiting for me to reboot.
I don't know.
Yeah, the other thing I'm working on.
I don't know if you guys see what I put up on my screen behind me. I don't know if it's. Oh, it won't go out because I did it in Skype. Oh yeah, that joke won't work. Oh well. All right, I'll have to figure out another way to do that. Another joke for another day. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I was just saying the other thing I've been working on a lot is we've had a show on it, doing development in the browser, and I'm working on the curriculum for a high school hackathon next spring. Maybe it'll be in February. The date's a little bit up in the air, and the idea is for everything to work in a student's browser. So that's fun problem solving.
Well, you've been working on that, trying to solve that for years, right?
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, definitely.
It probably,
we're getting closer.
You're probably
every year.
more optimistic now than ever.
Every year it gets a little better.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Yeah, we're getting there. You could probably, build your own tool. I think one of the demos I saw about Blazor was something of a REPL, like notebook kind of thing in Blazor. That was probably if I look at the agenda, I could probably remember which talk that was. And I wonder if there's a way to what we even talked about. I think we talked about, and you maybe thought about doing this for one of yours, is to use notebooks, I'm talking about Jupyter notebook style, style things. But you could probably, if you only had the time to do this, you could probably build an application that hosted, like a web app that hosted this curriculum for you,
So Jupyter Notebooks has come a long way, and I know the .NET Interactive team has been very busy. I can't wait to watch their session. I have not watched it. There may have been more than one, but there was at least one today where I think I'm pretty sure, if I understand correctly, they've been working to try and get a C# kernel for Jupyter Notebooks, fully functional. But I even think there's some kind of cross-platform kernel so that one line of code in your notebook can be Python, and the next can be C#, and the next can be JavaScript, and the next can be F# and stuff like that.
But why not, right?
Which I think is their team, but I have to go check in on that. The other thing that's interesting, and I think it was demoed today, I think there might have been a session on it, is there is a Visual Studio Code extension that I think is called Code Tour. And the idea of it, the original idea, was that you could create a code tour in some kind of a declarative file. It might be JSON. I don't know what it is. Don't quote me on that. It might be YAML. I don't know. And the idea would be that you might have a new hire, and you tell him to go on the code tour, where it basically opens a file and then puts a little bubble up next to some code wherever you say to on a certain line, and you could say this code is the super frob the knob code, and then switch to the next tab or whatever. And so people have started running with that idea and using Code Tour to be an interactive tutorial guide, to the point where the folks who made that extension said we should add more features to assist with that scenario. So pretty cool stuff.
That's an interesting scenario. I think I could see use cases for that, but I also could see that it almost feels, and maybe I'm overthinking this too much, but is that like an anti-pattern to having your code be like really clean and readable in the first place? But I think when you're going into a new solution, there's always a little bit of that, like, wait, where is this stuff? Or here's a scenario I could think of, like, as a training thing. You guys have heard me talk about this, like, we have a sort of standard architecture and patterns that we use at work, right? Where we like applications to sort of follow certain things so that when developers jump around from one application to another, there's a certain basis where things look familiar. Certain folder structures and things like that. We use orchestrator pattern, and we have all these other little services that we inject in. And maybe it would be a cool way to do a training of that, to say, here's where you start. Here's, the way this works, right? You could definitely be good. I'm thinking more for generic training, not necessarily for a tour of an existing app. That would be a cool use case too. What's it called? Code Tour?
I think it's called Code Tour. Let me see. In fact, I need to find it because it's got to go into the show notes, right? Code Tour extension. Yeah, here we go. And
you want to put
I
up
think
on your
it even
screen
demos
like
it.
That? Yeah, put it up on your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up. And it, the GIF kind of demos it here.
Okay.
I haven't seen this, but apparently you can pick a line of code, start annotating it, put in Markdown, and then basically it's what it is? It's like meta comments, right? Because it's not comments in the code. But
so
I could see some use cases that aren't necessarily related to readability. Like maybe there's a great diagram that you could just embed right here. I don't know.
How does this? So wait, now this is the intro, right? Okay, so you have these tours, and you click.
Then you have a recorder, which apparently you can sequence this, and so the Chord Tour recording is started. So now this person's creating steps. Oh wow! Actually, I think we're watching the beginning of it again.
Yeah, this is the getting started thing. But
well,
this is
anyways, yeah,
recording tours.
Oh, there's more demos here.
Sure. Probably use Code Tour to demo the Code Tour. This is a neat tool that I had not seen or heard of. This is another one of those little tidbits that you never know what you're going to learn when you watch a show.
Yeah, I just heard about it today, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting.
I tell you what, I'm excited. I think I'm more excited than ever about Blazor.
Yeah,
we've had this conversation a little bit, on the air, off the air, about like, is it time to commit to Blazor? And it's pretty well baked now. I mean, one of the demos I saw, I guess yesterday, was, I don't know what they call it, like, not code refresh. What do they call it when, like, your browser refreshes when you make changes in Visual Studio, like that kind of synchronization for like.
Like a hot reload.
Hot reload. That's exactly the word. Hot reload.
Yeah.
They got the hot reload.
I don't think that's a feature, but
what's
the
that?
idea. I don't think that's a feature name, but I think that's the idea.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Right?
People were talking about that today. I didn't know what it was about, but they were saying like, how do I get this working? And so maybe there's something they announced or is working, or I just don't.
They demoed it yesterday. Now, maybe there's a trick to making it work. I don't remember that, right? But it just goes to show that the, it's becoming more mature. And it's faster now. They talked about how it's getting faster for loading, and they have a variety of features. We could probably look for like Blazor announcements from .NET 5 or something, because I don't think I could do it justice, but I wrote down some notes about some performance things, and I don't know. I think I need to write a Blazor app. Maybe not yet, working like, not a production ready app, but I think it's time that I do a deep dive myself, and I wonder how many other people are like starting to think about that. Like it's time. I want to get into it. I want to, not listen to other people talk about it, so to speak. Like I've seen the demos. I've been on shows like ours where we do the demo, we talk about it, but go in and really write some sort of business logic app, for myself. And I think I'm going to try to start doing that in my spare time, because I think I think Blazor's, it's cool, you know, and we've been asking for it for years.
Right.
And they delivered it. I'm generically saying we've been asking for it. Nobody was asking for Blazor. But we were asking for, like, you know, C# everywhere kind of thing. And, you know, not having to write JavaScript as an example, even though I've gotten to like JavaScript, ironically, after all these years. But, you know, Blazor's cool. It really seems like the thing I'm really excited about is that there's a lot of developers that are ASP.NET developers, not JavaScript developers or some other language developers. You know, they're ASP.NET developers. They know the Razor syntax and stuff like that. And it really just seems like going from that to Blazor is a pretty good transition, you know, like that they can make that move pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we didn't have in our framework in the ASP.NET side is with the rise of React and Vue, and then I think it's fair to say Angular sort of followed that direction, getting component based.
Right.
We didn't have that. We had Razor Pages, which is page based. We had MVC as controller based, and so Blazor gives you a component based methodology, which I'm no expert at, but I certainly would like to dive in. It's a little past time. I mean, like, here's that .NET Conf focus on Blazor, but even then, and not that these are probably still good videos to watch, but I imagine that today there was probably quite a bit of focus on it as well. So
yeah.
certainly,
to be clear, you're you know, because I see the date on there.
This
This
is
is the
on Blazor
previous
from
event.
January.
Yeah.
This is the previous event. This is today's event. I'm certain that
there's a lot of Blazor
.NET Conf .NET Conf has got a ton of topics in here, but here is Steve Sanderson talking at 10 Pacific time yesterday.
I watched that. You know, it was great.
Yeah.
You know, it was just great. It got me excited. And then
and I imagine as I jump down, there's more.
Yeah. This one I gotta pick on these guys a little bit on the second one. Great presentation by Dan Roth and Javier Cavaro Nelson. Really good talk. But everyone on the chat was kidding around that the Academy Award goes to Dan Roth. Because if you know about Blazor, you know Dan Roth knows Blazor. But he kept playing Javier, what I really like to do, and Javier would show it to him, and he'd be like, yeah. He had this great look on his face.
That's amazing.
And don't let that take away from you seeing this talk. This was a great Blazor talk. But it was really funny how everybody was sort of joking around, like, great acting, Dan, you know, like.
Right, because I think if you've been following the Blazor, you know, it's all of its history. You know that Dan has been shepherding that thing
from the beginning.
Dan and Steve from the beginning, right? So,
yeah.
Anyways, interesting. Right now, here's another talk. I think this might have been a community one. If I get here to day 2, it looks like this is where we're getting towards the community. We're saying like, hey, you can kind of be Jamstack style with Blazor, you know, where and I think that's true. I think there is a tutorial in the docs about Blazor being hosted as a static web app, and so that's technically what Jamstack is, right? Is static front end and then off to APIs on the back.
You got me thinking a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch to use the word Jamstack, right? Because Jamstack, isn't it JavaScript and markup?
Oh no, Jamstack has a meaning, but just like Ajax didn't really stand for asynchronous JavaScript and XML for very long, I think now people look at Jamstack to mean static front end and talk to serverless in the back. Although you're right, it's not what it stands for.
But
you're right.
Yeah. But it is interesting. What they are saying is go full serverless, right? And I think that and of course, you know, there's a server somewhere, but you're hosting static content, right? And I think that's a cool idea that I guess you could do that. I guess Blazor supports that, right? Why not? There's more Blazor.
I would love to know what this is about. Micro front ends with Blazor.
Yeah,
I would love to hear that concept. Micro front ends. Huh. I don't know what that. Right now, I can only sort of guess what that must mean. We'll have to watch that talk.
And what was this?
And
MVVM?
then maybe.
They're just showing that they can use
the MVVM toolkit. Yeah.
It's been around a while. I guess they're saying you can still use it, you know, for
Blazor and
modeling things.
GraphQL. And then getting started, and then building components. And I mean, there is a lot here.
It's safe to
as
say
I'm
that
going through
Blazor is an important part of .NET Conf.
Yeah. Jeff Fritz with the Blazor Web Forms components. He's been building on his stream for quite a while now.
Look at the Blazor.
Yeah.
Blazor. And I need to carve out time for Blazor. You know, I know that.
This finished, by the way.
What's that?
My Visual Studio installer finished, by the way.
Oh,
I think it finished several minutes ago when we were talking.
That is not that bad. Let's be clear.
Yeah, it's been finished for a while. I have to reboot though, which doesn't always happen with Visual Studio.
You must have not closed it because you have Visual Studio open.
No, it said in there that a reboot was required.
I think I needed to reboot, and I just did mine today.
It's okay. Doesn't matter.
Mine is better.
So yeah, we'll get these tabs out to folks. In fact, if we're at a good place here, I'll go ahead and create it.
I'm already thinking about, and I know this is not the thing I'm supposed to be thinking about. The viewers want to just enjoy the content and listen to us ponder all these great things. And I'm already starting to think, when I hit the end stream button, is it all going to work properly? That's, you know, like, it's what got me nervous. But, you know, we'll see.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we had a lot of interesting discussion, right? A little bit of the past, a little bit of the future. How should we build apps? How should we start our apps? A lot of stuff. So in any case, if you're watching us live, thank you very much for being here. Really do appreciate it. Appreciate everybody that gave us chat and comments. And then just, you know, being here and being part of the conversation. And please, if you're enjoying it, you know, definitely be sure to hit the follow button and let us know. And you can always catch us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow, where you'll see this video, that one tab, which basically expands out to tabs for all the things we talked about, will be there too. And if you like the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so that you'll always know when a new replay is ready. Other than that, gentlemen, are we good for this Wednesday?
I'm good. It was a fun show.
All right.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, glad that everybody had fun, and hopefully you had fun, and hopefully we see you next Wednesday at 8:30 U.S. Eastern Time, right here on the Dev Talk Show. But before I sign off, I want to make sure I don't forget that on behalf of my co-hosts, Rich Ross and Andy Schwam, who did a great job running that stream.
Yep.
There's a lot that goes on to keep the thing going. So thanks a lot, Andy, for getting all that working and hitting feature chat and all that. Thank you very much. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.